Today's episode is brought to you by Mazars.
SoundCartel.
Once upon a time, airport travel was fun. Remember those days? But then, terrorist activity got in the way, enforcing security issues like never before. And to top things off, COVID turned up. So what does that mean not only for travellers, but for airports? From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. With COVID came a sudden emptying of airports, and the whole world went to ground. But let's be positive, that's not going to last. Already there's movement afoot, and soon we'll be up in the air again. Question is, can we look forward to an improved airport experience? One person who has the travelling public clearly in his vision is Greg Fordham. His company, Airbiz, a success story in its own right, has been at the forefront of airport innovation from design and technology to everything in between. Airbiz works with airport operators, airlines and governments around the world, grappling with a multitude of interests to find the smoothest transition from A to B for all air travellers. And so, what's in store for us as we get ready for liftoff? Heather Dawson asks Greg Fordham first, have airports needed to adjust rapidly to recent changing times?
Absolutely, Heather, with terrorism and particularly after the September 11 incidents. We saw a whole range of security processes introduced at our airports. And so when COVID hit, there was natural concern that suddenly we're going to end up turning our airports into medical centres or even hospitals. And there were examples where they actually rolled out hospital beds in airports. So there was a great push to try and avoid anything being set up permanently. And if possible, hopefully it was something that would pass and that we had temporary facilities. A good example of that being here in Australia with the state border closures. We suddenly had state health authorities setting up at our airports, and wherever possible, the airports tried to put those in temporary facilities so as they didn't become too permanent. Because, as we all know, the old case of elephant repellent, we haven't seen any elephants for a while, we better keep spraying that repellent.
Well, let's talk about changes to airports, maybe the airports of the future a bit as well. But you consult with pretty much all the stakeholders involved in aviation, don't you? You know, from the owners of airports and the operators to government and so on. Do they all have different priorities, which make it tricky for you?
Spot on, Heather. The technology is the easy part, but the change management is quite hard, particularly when you've got, as you mentioned, so many different stakeholders coming from operational backgrounds involved. And unfortunately out there, generally in the world, for every innovator, there's at least 99 naysayers who love to come into the room with buckets of ice-cold water. So whenever we're faced with that dilemma of trying to introduce change, we use a process, or recommend to our clients to use a process of getting the CEO to send an email to his counterpart in the airlines, the border agencies, the various stakeholders, tenants at the airports, CEO to CEO saying, we're looking at this new opportunity and we want to do a very quick proof of concept. So for 6 weeks, we want you to nominate someone who's recognised in your industry, in your organisation, with enough responsibility and is seen as a lateral thinker, and we want them to participate in this quick, short, sharp proof of concept. So we get them along and they come along, and usually at the first meeting they're all kind of enthusiastic, but they can't help themselves saying, oh, we can't do that because, oh, we can't do that. And I usually let that run for a while, and then I say, hang on a moment, you've been nominated to be part of this group because you're meant to be an innovator and a lateral thinker. How about putting some solutions on the table? And from that point forward, it's amazing how they then compete to see who can come up with the best solution to solve the problems.
Just tell us briefly, Greg, about the different aspects of your business, because people might not really know what Airbiz is all about. And is there one bit of Airbiz that actually dominates?
Right. So traditionally our clients are airports and airlines, and we did a lot of master plans for airports, what they look like in the future. We do terminal conceptual planning and design, and the same on the airfield, planning out the runways, the taxiways, the aprons. But then as time's gone on, apart from our technical aspect, we've tried to help our clients make money as well as spending their money, and particularly on the technology push. So for well over 10 years now, we've been pushing fast travel, the self-service technology in that. Like, for instance, we went to Qantas and said, you've got to give all your frequent flyers a smart card and permanent bag tag. And we worked with them with their process. And then we went and we did it with other airports and airlines around the world, particularly Singapore, the latest terminal there, T4. We introduced the fast travel, the self-service, to the day of opening. The development director and CEO at Singapore Airport came up to me and said, Greg, we achieved our objective of 0 queues, which is quite a thing to say at an airport. And most recently helping Japan, both the airlines and the airports, planning for the Olympics. Unfortunately, they won't be getting as many visitors as they'd hoped through their airports.
No, right. Well, in terms of business analysis, which you do, what are you seeing ahead in terms of what airline travellers want? Is it the queues? Is it fast travel? What are their biggest demands, Greg?
Well, obviously they want to get rid of those queues, and that's what they want. They want fast processing and actually removing not only the time for the processing, but the space taken up with all that processing, and that's where the technology part comes in, making use of the web and off airport. And then that space that we've thrown up, replacing it with interesting and fun activities that we all like to do, because we do spend time at airports, with interesting retail, entertainment and experiences.
Lots of do-it-yourself bag drops and all this technology. Is that all working well in terms of customer adaptability and acceptance?
Yes, it is, Heather. Even for the premium passenger, who traditionally not only wanted but expected that personalised service, to get a better seat or maybe an upgrade or whatever, very reluctant to move to self-service. However, the way we've achieved that is by giving them control and guaranteeing their time. So, for example, instead of the old system where they're going for an early morning flight and they didn't know how much time to allow in the check-in process, could they get caught in a queue for 15, 20 minutes? With the self-service technology, we can guarantee they will be through the check-in process in, instead of 20 minutes, 20 seconds.
OK, Greg, well, any new technologies being worked on that we can expect round the corner? Maybe when we all get up in the sky again?
Well, I'll call that, Heather, the airport tech trifecta of biometrics, web-based technology and touchless, of course, all being accelerated by COVID. As I mentioned before, we've been banging on about this for well over a decade, but COVID has certainly accelerated the introduction application of all those elements and moving to face on the fly, so that effectively, having checked in, say at home, our face then becomes the token to move through the various processes of check-in, border control and then boarding the aircraft actually. And last year we thought, look, the early stage of COVID, let's not waste a crisis, let's get some reform. And we produced a model to improve or streamline the process for international arriving passengers. So quite simply, at the airport of departure, say you were travelling from Los Angeles, when you checked in there would be a photograph taken of you and your bag, you'd submit a digital arrivals card and probably now a digital health passport to say that you'd had a COVID test or whatever that was required. And all that would be uploaded before you even, the aircraft took off. So then the various border agencies back here in Australia would have 14 hours to go through all that information. So instead of the current system of arriving and them looking at you and your bag and your arrivals card and making a split-second decision, we would give them 14 hours to go through all of that and spread the load. We thought it was pretty logical. We shot it around to airports, stakeholders, organisations, right up through the government. Our timing probably wasn't the best because they were just focused on what has hit us with COVID, but we're still pushing, and that old word of perseverance, I will keep persevering and hopefully we'll get some change.
Do, yes, excellent. And to airport facilities more broadly, such as, the parking, terminal access, all the duty-free shops and the lounges and so on, are big differences being introduced, or are they around the corner too?
Well, by their very nature now, the airports are a connectivity of transport modes, not just air transport, but major road access. Certainly rail now is more common at most airports, and some even sea ferries connecting in. So wherever you get that hub activity, naturally you get the requirement for lots of interesting commercial type development, offices, people congregating around because of the connectivity of transport. And then that flows on to retail opportunity, food and beverage and entertainment. So we're going to see a lot more non-direct aeronautical type development happening at our airports for sure.
Okay. Now, the business traveller, you've got a business audience here, Greg. Are they well catered for, do you think? Should they be a priority in any way?
Well, of course, again, for the business traveller, it's all about time. So, for example, the other day in the office, we were looking at planning for urban air mobility, so the use of personal air vehicles or air taxis. And we were looking at routes from the CBD, whether it be off the top of an office building or a hotel or whatever, through to the airport. And then where do we land them? At the airport. And you've got the interface of these vehicles plus aircraft. So it's an interesting one from the airspace, of course, but then for the convenience. So a passenger's paid quite a premium to use this sort of facility that will catch on now quite quickly. And so it wouldn't be appropriate for them to land quite a distance from the terminal and then have to use another mode to get there. In fact, what we were saying is because of the certainty of that mode of transport between the CBD and the airport, they could actually get their boarding call, so to speak, from their hotel room or for their office and given a certain time, and the vehicle itself would do the security checks and they'd land very close to the aircraft and board the aircraft directly. Now, we might be a little way off of that, but that's the vision we're trying to integrate into all of our planning. Another innovative concept we're working on is instead of having long piers and concourses that you have to walk down and dedicated gate lounge, we are proposing to use autonomous vehicles to take passengers. They remain in the main terminal zone surrounded by the retail and dining experiences, and then at time of boarding, an autonomous vehicle will take them directly to the aircraft. And we've got a concept of that we've labelled Easy Gates, EASI, Express Access Swing Intelligent Gates, and we've got a concept. And we had it out to a number of airports pre-COVID and was getting quite a bit of traction, and now hopefully with the recovery we might see the opportunity to implement that sort of design, which will reduce the walking distance for passengers and make it cheaper to develop for airports and cheaper to operate for airlines. The other big thing that's changing, of course, is sustainability. There was a certain emphasis pre-COVID, particularly in the Northern Hemisphere, with things like flight shame and that. But now, for all of us, we're all going to be challenged. You didn't fly during 2020. Why do you need to fly now? And so it's really going to take a whole of industry approach. And in fact, we're just finishing a big report for Airports Council International, which is the world body of the world airports, looking at their long-term carbon goals. So we've had to interview airport CEOs from around the globe and try and get them all together with a consistent goal for leading to net zero carbon, which is an interesting challenge.
Well, Greg, your business works across 5 continents, is that right?
Yes.
So where are your biggest projects at the moment, and how have you managed to sustain the workload during COVID?
Well, Heather, yes. Aviation, last April, May, we got smashed like a lot of people. Almost overnight, 80% of our income just disappeared. But then through a lot of hard work and thanks to government subsidies from around the world, wherever we employ people, and I have to say ours is a great case of those subsidies working because we've managed to keep a very highly specialist team together and continue on. And of course our global spread, we've been able to hunt up projects in all sorts of places, some I'd never heard of before. A lot harder, a lot tougher, but we've been able to do it. And there are opportunities in the Middle East and the Pacific. North America is potentially a big growth area for us. And right now, even though we're still going through COVID, thanks to a Victorian Government Global Gateway grant, it's assisting us to now ramp up our expansion into the USA, which I wouldn't have expected us to be doing mid-crisis, but we are. And I guess it comes back, I know it's an old saying, but I said it to myself several times over the last year in the shower of a morning: when the going gets tough, the tough get going.
That was AirBiz founder and managing director, Greg Fordham. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow @BE Daily Podcast across social media and head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Mazars. To find out more, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.